Hi everyone, this is Paul here from the Magdalene Centre. Today I'm doing the astrology report for the partial solar eclipse taking place in Cancer, which occurs on the 13th of July at 2:47 a.m. Universal Time, which here in the UK translates as 3:47 a.m. because the clocks are forward for the summer months. Now, before I go through the actual explanation of what the solar eclipse in Cancer offers us to be learning at this time, I just want to clarify, as I always do, that the astrology of the eclipse doesn't control our lives in any way, shape or form. It's a way of helping us understand what spiritual lessons are on offer for us to be learning at this point, what kinds of themes may be playing out collectively, and how can we potentially empower ourselves through using it. But at the end of the day, we all have free will, and how things manifest depend on how we exercise our free will. So the more we know ourselves and the more we utilise the energies around us to help us know ourselves even better, the less likely we are to feel the effects of the astrology going on around us. Now, in terms of the solar eclipse in Cancer, this is like a new moon on steroids. It's very powerful, but with the moon coming in between the Earth and the sun often represents the ego or the conscious self, and with the moon representing the subconscious coming in front of it, the conscious self or the ego, or the way we define ourselves, is blocked out by the subconscious and become more aware of the deeper recesses of who we are. With this happening in the moon's home sign of Cancer, the moon's energy will be particularly strong this time. So what we're looking at here is delving into our own subconscious, looking at how does conditioning from our past affect our present, and how are we keeping old scripts or old emotional conditioning from childhood alive within our own minds because we haven't let go, we haven't separated the thoughts from the emotions. Because emotions are triggered by thoughts at the end of the day, and thought patterns generally rise through our conditioning. So it's learning to move beyond our conditioning to free the emotions from the past so that any emotional responses we have to anything are based purely in the present moment, in the moment to moment passage of time, rather than them being a reaction to something based on past conditioning. So it's learning to free ourselves from our past conditioning. Cancer also deals with things like emotional security. So one of the things we need to be looking at or observing during this time is, where do we still rely on other people to meet our emotional needs, or where do we expecting other people to help us feel secure emotionally, and how can we learn to create that emotional security on the inside through nurturing ourselves? How can we learn to remove any dependence on other people for our emotional well-being and stay creative for ourselves? So eventually the emotions are no longer dependent on people being a certain way, or the emotions we feel are not triggered by people around us, or are not reliant on other people having to deliver our emotions for us. It's about creating emotional security on the inside so we're not emotionally triggered by events happening around us. We feel calm and composed within ourselves, and this enables us to come from a place of strength rather than a place of dependency and neediness. So it's also looking at, where do we still engage in any kind of needy behaviours in our relationships? Where do we still have some kind of subconscious dependence on others? And how do we get rid of these insecurities? How can we get real with ourselves and learn to feel our own emotions, to feel how we really feel rather than how we think we should be feeling at this point? And it's work going down into the depths of who we are. So this particular solar eclipse may well give us an opportunity for some significant self-healing through delving deep into the subconscious mind and drawing out any past conditioning. So for some of us, if we haven't done any work on ourselves, the solar eclipse may bring up uncomfortable emotions. The key here is that we need to be able to sit with our emotions rather than trying to run from them or bury them or suppress them. It's getting in touch with the emotions, both the pleasant and the unpleasant, and learning to allow them to flow so that we're in touch with our emotions, but they don't control us, but they're not suppressed either. the emotions flow smoothly like a river between its banks, but the banks contain the emotions so they don't flood and overwhelm the rest of the psyche, but the water is still flowing very smoothly. Now, with the solar eclipse being almost directly opposite Pluto retrograde, this brings in an extra layer of intensity to the picture, because Pluto is in the opposite sign of Capricorn, and is highlighting needs that, or trying to highlight to all of us that if we really want to be empowered in our lives, if we really want to be true to who we are, then we have to take responsibility for ourselves. But with oppositions, one of the common manifestations of the opposition is a tendency to project issues onto other people. So one thing we need to be mindful of, if we're not already, is where do we have a tendency to project our own emotional issues onto someone else and blame that person for the way we feel, even though that person's probably got nothing to do with emotions. The emotions have been triggered on something that happened probably years ago, and we just blame them because that person happened to push a button of ours. But if we want to change this, then we need to change the script in our minds. We need to, instead of blaming other people for how we feel, it's ask ourselves, why are we feeling this way? What within our own minds is being triggered by this event, and why are we experiencing these particular emotions at this time? And through doing this and becoming more aware of our own emotional conditioning and taking responsibility for our own emotions, so we don't just blame everyone else on it, so we don't have to deal with the core or the root of the issue. If we take responsibility for our internal landscape, so we remove any triggers from within, so the external events can't trigger these emotional outbursts, and through transforming the psyche, through embracing patience, discipline, and self-control, we can then empower ourselves to develop, gaining greater control over ourselves and the way we respond to situations, so that situations no longer have any power over us. We recognise that the true power is within us, and it's born out of taking responsibility for who we are, of how we respond to things, and for how we invest our energy in situations. So do we give away our power to other people, or do we recognise that our power is within us, so we don't need to gain control of other people, we don't need to fight other people to feel powerful? The true power lies in surrender. I don't mean surrendering to another person, I mean surrendering the ego's conditioning to a higher power. That way, we're no longer driven by our egos. We recognise that the conditioning of the ego isn't who we are. That's just something that's been built over time, but now we can strip away the layers of illusion that keep us playing at a lower level than who we can be, and through shedding the different layers of illusion and taking back our power from external events, we become much more powerful. But this power is born internally, and if we're truly connected with this power, we don't feel any need to try and control our external environment, because the environment doesn't have any effects, any influence over us anymore, because any given moment we have the power to choose how we respond to it. But the astrology itself won't make this happen. It's up to each and every one of us to make this happen, and it starts with ourselves. It's all very well and good knowing something, but if we don't actually apply it within ourselves, if we don't work on ourselves in that given area, how on earth can we really claim to be able to tell other people what they should be doing? The onus is on each and every single one of us to work on ourselves, to take that inward journey through the mind, clearing out old emotional baggage, clearing out thought patterns which no longer serve us, and just like a broken record in the mind, and breaking free of any power dynamics which either are based on trying to control other people, or we feel like we're being oppressed by the people. But it depends on us agreeing to participate in the dynamic for it to keep going. As soon as one person steps out of it and stops investing energy in any given dynamic, that dynamic then has to collapse, because it collapsed under its own weight. It no longer has the energy sustaining it. So the onus is on every single one of us to observe how we respond to situations, how we interact with other people, and where things are triggering us still, rather than just blaming it on the other person, is step back and breathe. If you need to, step away from the situation for a period and reflect on the responses to try and understand why did the situation trigger that particular emotional response, because chances are it's not the situation, it resembles something from a long time ago that we're still holding the residual charge from. But if we can remove any residual emotions tied to old events and learn to nurture ourselves through creating emotional security within ourselves, and through nurturing ourselves, through loving ourselves, through spending time alone, so that don't mean that we isolate ourselves, but solitude can be very healing if done with the intent of getting to know ourselves and to clear the mind out. So spending time in silence so the mind isn't being stimulated by the environment, and it gives us an opportunity to go within ourselves and do that inner work of connecting with our emotions, reflecting on what we need to let go of now. And if we work on ourselves and learn to love ourselves for who we are and be able to nurture ourselves, we then that enables us to nurture other people unconditionally. So it's no longer based on someone being a certain way or doing certain things for us or meeting certain needs. We're able to nurture that person because we already meet those needs within ourselves, and we're then able to love others unconditionally, to nurture them in an unconditional way, whilst obviously setting boundaries where appropriate to make sure that they're aware that we're not there to be a doormat. We're there to nurture them because we want to, but we don't have to. It's if they don't want to receive that nurturing, that's their choice. We then need to step away if that's the case. But as I said at the start, it's up to each and every one of us to take responsibility for the process. The astrology gives us the opportunity, but it doesn't make things happen. We actually have to engage in the process. Otherwise, no learning really takes place and nothing changes. But I hope that's a useful guide for the eclipse. We do have a couple of weak trines to the eclipse itself, one from Neptune in Pisces and one from Jupiter, who's recently turned direct over in Scorpio. So it's a grand water trine going on, though it is a lot weaker than it was earlier in the week. So Jupiter in Scorpio further highlights the need to go deep into the unconscious and allow this unconscious to be made conscious and aware, so we can then shed any obsessive thought patterns, any emotional reserves or emotions that are based on something that happened ages ago and we haven't let go of that issue. And again, as I said before, it's about surrendering those patterns to a higher power, so we're no longer driven by our past, we're no longer obsessing over something that happened ages ago and losing our peace of mind in the process. We're empowering ourselves through letting go of the past, of allowing unconditional love to flow through us rather than fear and judgment. And this then enables us to empower other people through being an embodiment of an empowered soul. And with Neptune retrograde in Pisces, we're looking at developing things like universal love, compassion, psychic sensitivity and empathy for one another. But again, it requires that we work on ourselves first through shedding any illusions that we hold on to, any addictive tendencies, and any tendencies we use to numb ourselves so we don't feel our emotions properly. And instead, use some of the gifts of Pisces like meditation, contemplation, reflection, and spiritual exercises that help to open the mind to higher levels of consciousness and allow us to connect more deeply with the universal consciousness and the universal heart, so that we can love one another, and so love ourselves and love one another. So this solar eclipse in essence is all about learning to love and nurture ourselves and nurture one another, but it requires working on ourselves first rather than expecting other people to do the work, because by working on ourselves we naturally become stronger and we're then better able to help the people around us when they need it. So it's the whole, if we help ourselves, then we're better able to help one another, because we're naturally stronger, and other people benefit naturally as a result because we're stronger and better able to help them. So I hope the solar eclipse brings you much illumination and much growth over the next few months, and I hope you develop a much greater degree of emotional security and that sense of universal love and compassion and nurturing impulse for oneself and one another. So take care, and may you get many blessings from the solar eclipse in Cancer.